Okay, so second video about the history of Native Americans. So we were talking about these periods, and we were coming to an end to the explanation of these periods on the concept of injustice, on the fact that the Native Americans had to be subjected to treaties that they didn't want to sign, and that were called one-side treaty because they were only taking into account the interest of the Americans and not the interest of the Native American. So the second period is the period from 1924 to 2016. So this period is underlining the social progress of Native American, and the idea that they progressively gain some rights to be finally considered as full citizens and making them able to enjoy the same rights as the other Americans. So right, but these gain of rights needed some fight and some constant fight, and the rights were in a way the result of these fights. Even as we saw, there were at some point some restriction and condition that limited the enjoyment of these rights. And so the last period is today, and today we will focus on this protest against the construction of pipelines that runs through the territory of Native Americans, and it seems that the past is suddenly reappearing in the present, because it seems that the land of the Native American is not respected, and that the promises of the different treaties that were signed are not respected as they should be. So it's a new circle, a new vicious circle, where there is a lack of trust of the Native Americans regarding the federal state, and this idea that we seem to move backward to the past because Native Americans need to fight again to be able to enjoy the same rights as the other Americans. So I ask you to work on some extract of two documents and to compare what is said in these two documents with the history of Native Americans that we have just seen. So first, these two documents, the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, are two official documents that both embody the values of the ideals and the principle of the United States. These two documents are at the birth of the United States, and in a way are are two documents that officialize the creation of the United States, and they both they both list the different values and principles that the United States want to represent through the creation of this nation, because they want to embody an image of a free nation, because they left England, and they left tyranny and oppression to find freedom and to really embody this idea of a land of freedom. So if you take the extracts of the two official documents, and please take your highlighter to highlight the keywords. So these extracts focus on this idea of principle, of values that the United States want to represent. So this idea of equality, this idea of rights, happiness, life, liberty, this idea of justice, welfare, and this idea that it's a land of freedom, so the federal state cannot prohibit prohibit people to do things freely, and they are forbidden to abridge the freedom of the citizens of the United States. And here again, we've got there is a focus on the law, which should protect equally all the citizens, and that all the citizens are protected under the law. So you can see that these keywords are totally in opposition with the keywords that we underline in the different key dates that mark the history of Native Americans. And so by doing this, by opposing the official documents that are representing the birth of this ideal nation and the history of the Native Americans, you can see that they are in total contradiction, opposition, and it really underlines the inner paradoxes of this nation between so what was promised, because they call themselves the Promised Land, what was promised, what was praised at the beginning, and what was the ideals that they wanted to represent, and the US as a new nation in practice, and the opposition with what was happening really when they created the nation. So it's really important to understand these inner paradoxes, which are at the core of the identity of the US. So I ask you to think about this quote, which was said by an historian. To understand Native Americans is to understand America. So first, you need to analyze that this sentence is based on parallelism. That is, that to understand Native Americans, this is the first part, equals understand America. So you've got a kind of mirror in between, which reflects the two sides of the sentence. So you've got two key concepts, America and Native America. So here, by saying America, you refer to the nation, you refer to the sense of national history. You can also refer to this idea of the identity of the nation, of the essence of the nation, and the characteristic of this nation, and how this nation can be identified. And on the other way, you've got the Native Americans. So here you refer to a community, which is a minority in the United States. And you can also refer to this idea of local history opposed to national history. This idea that we're talking about the history of a community, which is part of a nation. So you've got an opposition between the whole is the entire nation, the US, and Native American represent a part of this nation. And the historian wants to point at the fact that this part of the nation is a symbol of the whole nation, because this community might also represent other parts of the nation, of the minorities, other minorities, other communities, and these different parts represent or symbolize the whole nations. So why does the historian say this? So first, the history of Native American is really symbolic because it represents the conflicts between the rights of the majority and the rights of minorities, since the majority and the minorities can't enjoy the same rights as the minorities, and the federal state is responsible for this because he's limiting the access of the rights for the minorities, and the federal state represent this majority. So the history of Native American shows how power works in the United States, because you've got an opposition between the powerful and the powerless. Moreover, so it's a consequence. We have seen that in this sentence you've got you can draw a contrast between the national history and the history of the community, and the history of the Native American is really symbolic when you think about how history works in the United States. And so in the case of Native Americans, the United States have been trying to erase this local history, the history of the community, by the policy of assimilation. There has been resistance from the Native American. Then they have given up, and then there is a new resistance today. So we can see that today there are new voices that want to be heard, that want to be visible, and that want to be part of this mainstream culture. And if you think about this, it's a bit the same for Afro-American, because you've got the same process of history, where history wants to silence these voices. But today, for example, with Black Lives Matter or different movement like this, you've got resurgence of these voices who want to be heard. So the history of Native American reflect the history of other communities present in the present in America. And so it leads us to think about this question of identity and how the history of Native American reflect the identity of America. The U.S. The federal states has always claimed that Americans, Indians, are essentials to their own sense of themselves, because the U.S. want to be shown as a nation of conquest, a nation of power, a nation of discovery, of creation, of autonomy. And so they created their identity through this image. But at the same time, Native Americans are essential to the identity of the US as a nation of conquest, but at the same time, they don't really want to know about them. They don't really want to know this part of them. And as we saw with history, they wanted to erase this part of themselves and to lead this part of the identity away. So, and this leads us to the inner paradoxes of a nation, of this nation, which is supposed to be a nation of immigrants, but this nation is fraught with conflicts between minorities, ethnic minorities, and the white majority, so we can see with Native Americans, but we can see this with Latinos, we can see this with Afro-American, we saw that with Chinese, we can see this with Mexicans, with Muslims. So the historian that said this quote wanted to highlight the paradoxes of the identity of America, and wanted to show that the history of all the different communities is symbolizing the how America works and how power works in America. So I hope it's clear. It was a really long correction. So I hope that you have taken notes and that you are going to reread your notes and learn your notes so that we can move on with the sequence. So along with the lesson to watch and to learn, next time I want you to watch the speech by Justin Trudeau, so in Canada, but the history is the same, and is